President Obama has a new tax plan. Is it good policy or bad for business? We report, you decide. Now, President Obama wants to close tax loopholes for companies and individuals with operations or bank accounts overseas. The president says his tax reform policy will generate $210 billion in new tax revenue over 10 years and help create jobs at home. President Obama announced the new tax proposal today. Standing next to him, Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner, who notoriously had his own tax issues. Awkward.
It's a tax code that makes it all too easy for a small number of individuals and companies to abuse overseas tax havens, to avoid paying any taxes at all. The way to make American businesses competitive is not to let some citizens and businesses dodge their responsibilities while ordinary Americans pick up the slack. Unfortunately, that's exactly what we're doing. And that's why today I'm announcing a set of proposals to crack down on illegal overseas tax evasion, close loopholes, and make it more profitable for companies to create jobs here in the United States. For years, we've talked about ending tax breaks for companies that ship jobs overseas and giving tax breaks to companies that create jobs here in America. That's what our budget will finally do. We will stop letting American companies that create jobs overseas take deductions on their expenses when they do not pay any American taxes on their profits.
These actions will increase access to information held by overseas banks so that we can collect taxes that are owed to the United States but are never paid. These are common sense changes designed to restore balance to our tax code. The President's budget will add up to 800 full-time IRS employees devoted to detecting and bringing to justice those who unlawfully hide assets and income.
Joining us live is Dan Mitchell, Senior Fellow at the Cato Institute. Dan, I just want to mention two things. One is, that's the Secretary of Treasury standing there, the man who owed taxes but didn't pay back beyond the statute of limitations because he was not legally obliged to. He didn't have to. But when the President says dodge while ordinary citizens pick up the slack, I thought to myself the Treasury Secretary must be dying standing there. But then the Treasury Secretary, he then complained about taxes owed but never paid, and it only got worse. Anyway, that's my thought on standing there. But take it away. What do you think of the President's idea on this reform?
Well, the big piece of what the President's talking about is this notion of ending what's known as deferral for U.S. companies or severely restricting it. What this basically means is a giant tax increase on American companies that are trying to compete and win market share overseas. So this is going to result in American companies losing business, closing down foreign subsidiaries, not bringing jobs back to America. Instead, they'll be getting rid of jobs in America because they'll no longer be sending exports to their foreign subsidiaries. This is a spectacularly misguided proposal. In a competitive global economy, you don't saddle your companies with extra costs. No other country in the world does this kind of crazy policy.
Let me ask you something. Do they pay taxes overseas where they're doing business? Do they pay it to those countries where they're earning money?
Yeah, that's the key thing. If an American company has a business subsidiary in Ireland, it pays tax to the Irish government. And what Obama's proposal would do is it would make the double taxation they pay to the IRS even worse. The Germans don't do that. The Canadians don't do that. Even the French, who love taxes, don't do this kind of crazy policy. We are literally shooting our companies in the foot while other countries are making it easier for their companies to compete around the world.
So who likes this idea? I know you don't, but I mean, what constituency likes this idea?
Well, the people who are susceptible to left-wing demagoguery about shipping jobs offshore, even though all the evidence shows just the opposite. Even the Democrats on Capitol Hill, especially behind closed doors, know this isn't a good idea. We've already seen the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, Charlie Rangel, and the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, Max Baucus, both Democrats, have expressed a lot of concern about this because they know in the real world that if you saddle American companies with costs that their foreign competitors aren't paying, you're going to kill American jobs. This is a greedy money grab by Obama and his team that's going to hurt America if it goes through. All
right. Well, that's not the entire aspect of his reform. I was hoping he'd actually try to streamline the American tax code so that people could understand it, even maybe so Secretary of Treasury could understand it, I might say tongue-in-cheek. I mean, I was hoping that the tax reform would focus on that, because it is incomprehensible in many ways. But he was also talking about people having money offshore, people, these tax havens, closing those. Do you disagree with that concept?
I think every country should have the sovereign right to determine its own tax policy. And if some place like Singapore or the British Virgin Islands or Switzerland has a better tax system than we have, it shouldn't be our right to bully them into changing their tax laws any more than we would want a foreign country to tell us what our tax laws are allowed to be. So if we're worried that some Americans, either businesses or individuals, are moving their money to countries with better tax law, that should be a lesson to us that we should fix our tax law. That was the great insight of the Reagan tax cuts, which, of course, owed so much to Jack Kemp, and you had that great segment earlier. When we lowered tax rates dramatically in the 1980s, we collected a lot more money from rich people. There was a huge Laffer curve effect. That's the right way to get the rich people to pay more, not by interfering with the sovereign right of other jurisdictions to have the kind of tax policy that we should have.
Do you think we'll ever see a dramatic reform in our tax policy? I mean, people advocate all sorts of theories. For instance, some people think we should have only a sales tax or a consumption tax or a fair tax. Are we going to see that? Probably not in this administration, but our tax code is just so complicated.
We have a nightmare of a tax system that allows sleazy people to play all sorts of games if they hire the right lawyers, lobbyists, and accountants. We should completely rip it up and put in something like a flat tax or even a fair tax. But boy, we better get rid of the 16th Amendment so the politicians don't pull a bait and switch and stick us with both an income tax and a sales tax. Here's the problem. Who benefits most by this complicated tax system? The politicians, because they're the ones that raise all the campaign cash. They're the ones that have all this power to micromanage the economy. And so the 435 people in the House and the 100 people in the Senate, they're the very last people in the entire country that would ever give us real tax reform unless they're actually afraid of losing their jobs, because the American people finally say, we're sick and tired of this nightmare tax system where you have to hire paid professionals, where even the IRS gives you wrong answers when you ask questions.
Even the Treasury Secretary doesn't know the tax code. I should. Yeah. Once more, I get that jab in.
You took the words right out of my mouth. Half of the the Obama cabinet doesn't even pay their taxes correctly.
Well,
some because they're dishonest.
I think that's a little stretch. But anyway, I gotta go. I think the viewers got the idea. Anyway, Dan, thank you.